Okay, for this second portion, we are going to move on to this very general concept of being able to break the rules. So that's kind of cool. But the idea behind breaking the rules is you cannot break rules that you don't know. So know the rules, be able to understand them, follow them, and only then, by conscious decision, will you be able to break the rules. So if you really think about the concept of the rules of writing, whether or not it's a piece of short fiction or plays, the idea behind that is that all of these forms of writing follow a formula to such an extent that anyone can just follow the formula and be a good writer. But we know, if you've ever read anything that you're like, wow, I wasted my time reading this, we know that even writing that follows a formula can sometimes feel dry or overdone, or any of those items that just simply don't have this this oomph, this something that gets you to want to read on. So the rules are there so that you have some structure, but ultimately not so that you follow it completely blindly. So I'm not going to go too much into the items on this particular portion, other than to say that I think it is more than awesome if you go ahead and look up some of these items. The classic structures might be the 3-act structure. That would be both for novels and short stories, but clearly for playwriting as well. So the 3-act structure has Act 1 setting things up, the confrontation happens in the second act, and then the third act functions as a resolution. Certainly the most common item that I've seen as a teacher is sometimes known as Freytag's pyramid, which you might just know as the plot diagram. That is the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. Another structure would be the 5-act structure. Basically, it is the pyramid, but done in an act-by-act format, in which the rising action and the falling action are stretched out into 5 acts. And then the one that I think is definitely on the experimental side would be the Fridtchian curve, where there is no intro, and then there's just obstacles thrown in the way of the characters, and it goes straight to the climax. And this is, in my opinion, really great for limited style writing, where you have a time limit, or you have something that is like a 48-hour playwriting festival or film fest, where you only can use certain elements in your writing. So it just assumes that the reader or the viewer will be able to figure out the intro through how you write it. That kind of covers the basic classic plot structures, and now there are more mythical ones, specifically the heroic monomyth, sometimes known as the hero's journey. And if you were to watch epic storytelling like Star Wars, for example, you will notice that it follows this idea that the hero leaves the ordinary world, faces some sort of trials, tribulations, makes the changes that are necessary, returns home as a different character, as a hero. There are other possibilities for these models, including Dan Harmon's story circle, and that's where you start in a comfortable situation. Then the middle part is the most interesting. That's where it gets completely chaotic, and then it ends back in comfort. And then the one that I think anyone that wants to do some really good characterization is known as the Virgin's Promise. And that is a battle on the inside. So the battle is about what are the social expectations, how do I fight them, how do I become the person who has my own identity, and instead of giving a lot of lip service or physical confrontation with others outside of that main character, you get a lot of internal dialogue and a lot of changing taking place through reflection. And then finally, the beat or the modular framework. So again, I'm not going in depth with these, but you might want to look up Save the Cat, which is great for screenwriting, the 7-point story structure, which I'll talk about briefly. And then if you really want to get into something, the 27 chapter method. So a little bit on the 7-point story structure. Basically, it is this idea of always challenging your characters, making life as difficult for them as possible. So it begins with some sort of normal situation, and then there's going to be some sort of challenge or adventure where the plot turns. Then pressure will rise when the main conflict comes, the bad guy appears, the hero stops reacting and starts being proactive, deciding that the only way out of this situation is to become the hero, and fails. The failure is an important part in this structure because then the audience goes on this roller coaster kind of ride where they're like, will the hero make it? Will the hero fail? And that portion is known as the second pinch. And eventually it moves on to the second turn, in which the hero finds the key to how to fix the problem and finishes off with a resolution. So these are all structures that you can consider using, and I would definitely spend some time experimenting with some of them. But ultimately what I'm saying is if I were to not get into this, if I were a student in this module, one of the things I would think is like, oh, all stories have to be the pyramid structure. And that's simply not the case. So once you do a little bit of research, and I'm not talking about today, I'm talking about as you continue your journeys as writers, and you do the experimentation, one of the main things you can do is say, I'm going to give this one a try. I'm going to give that one a try. And find the ones that really resonate with you. And then, only then, go ahead and break the rules.